We received official notification of the award, I want to say late October. And fortunately, because this board had approved back in September conditional contracts or contracts conditioned on CNRWA getting the funding, we were already kind of geared up, if you will, with the contractors. We already had some things in place, including some preliminary press releases about the possibility of CNRWA getting funding and so forth. And we kind of started to organize around that. And when we got the official grant award, which was, I want to say, early November, we saw all the conditions and everything else. We put everything together in a very short amount of time, and I want to extend my appreciation to Jake for helping out with that effort as well, helping us along with the various contractors that we have working on this program. And we started to initially start working on some of the details of the applications, what the applications would look like, what the deed restrictions might look like, just other aspects of the program. And between early November and November 28th, we got all that, pretty much a lot of it in place. And we opened up the application period, I think, November 28th, which is that Monday after Thanksgiving, or maybe that Tuesday. Everything went live. Press releases went out. We started to do some other things to try to notify people. Bob Conrad went down to the Nevada Farm Bureau conference in Mesquite in November. I was out of town, so I couldn't do that. I participated in the Cattlemen's Association meeting, made a trip out to Diamond Valley in December, and we just kept pushing out lots of information and lots of media. And that was all handled, the media outreach was handled mostly, if not almost exclusively, by Bob Conrad, who did a great job on that. And lots of, through word of mouth and so forth and so on. So I initially received a number of requests, or I should say phone calls and emails, kind of more, asking more about more details about the program. And we'd also put together a frequently asked question sheet, which we tried to anticipate what those questions might be and had those already prepared. And then, of course, we had everything set up on the CNRWA website so that you could either apply online and try to get answers to your questions online, send requests for information, or you could download it, or you could even pick up an application from your county and mail it in, which we received several applications that way as well. And so we just kind of kept pushing things out, primarily with the media buy. And, we kind of out, ran out of the opportunities to do just media coverage without having to pay for it. At some point, we had to actually start buying ads and putting notices in various newspapers, and we tried to work with as many of the rural outlets as we possibly could.
I saw some of those. They looked great.
They looked really good.
Yeah.
No, in some cases, it took a little bit of, time to get all that going and explain what we were doing, but, I mean, everybody that we worked with was really great, and we really appreciate not only their just publishing it, but genuine interest in the program and really understanding after we talked to them about it, why this could be a good thing for the communities that they serve. So I think we had a really good partnership there with the media on this program. So that's kind of where we were. And just again, as a reminder, there are three levels or three prices that were determined based upon the analysis that was done by Hansford Economic Consulting. In Diamond Valley, that value per acre is $800. In other overpump basins in the central region, as well as the Humboldt region for that matter, $900 an acre foot. And then for any over-appropriated basin that's not overpumped, or at least based on Division of Water Resources data, it's $350 an acre. And then, excuse me, an acre foot. Thank you, Jake. And then In addition, this board agreed, and this is something that we'd recommended, is to add $50 per acre foot to each purchase, an additional $50 for work that might need to be done to transition that previously irrigated acreage to non-irrigation purposes and cover crops and mitigation of weeds and pests and rodents and those types of things. And so those are the three levels. And again, the purpose of the program, just as a reminder, is to retire water rights from willing sellers in priority basins. And we, at CNRWA, went through the list. We had a total of, I think, 7, maybe 8 or 9, I should say, over-pump basins in the central hydrographic region. A number of those basins were, at least a couple of those basins were not even within member counties. A few of them were shared with non-member counties, which is where, and in those non-member counties is where the majority of the pumping was taking place, so we excluded those. And then we ended up with really 4 priority basins: Diamond Valley, Basin 153, Smoky Valley, 137A, Stone Cabin, Flat 139, and Railroad Valley South 173A. Those are the 4 target basins. That's what's in our application, and that's what was in the grant agreement. And again, we could purchase water rights from someone outside of those basins, but those are the 4 priority
So
basins.
Jeff, 3 of the 4 are in Nye County?
Smoky Valley.
More or less, yeah, Smoky Valley.
Yeah, more or less.
Railroad, Stone Cabin, yeah.
So, since we still have another 3 days or 4 days for the applications to come in, it would be my recommendation, at least at this point, just for you to hear the update. And I can tell you that we have quite a few applications, which I'm pleased to report. We've had a lot of interest in the program. And I can tell you the process is that once I receive the application, whether it's online or in the P.O. box, I immediately send that to Resource Concepts, Inc. They are the water rights and engineering and technical folks that are really handling the sort of nuts and bolts of the program for us, and they do an amazing job. They've been extremely responsive and just very helpful in this whole process. And they take that application and they start the due diligence on all of the information that's on the application. If you haven't looked at the application, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, we're just asking for basic contact information about their water right, their duty, how much has been pumped in the last 5 years, whether there's any encumbrances on the property, just basic questions. But then RCI actually goes and looks at that and then visits with the Division of Water Resources to view their data, their records, to make sure everything matches up, and to make sure that, what is being submitted is basically, again, what's on the permit and in the state engineer's records. And then they prepare about a 1-page due diligence report that outline what they've checked, where everything checks out. And in many cases, quite frankly, there's some things that have come up that need to be addressed. So far, I can tell you that most of them have to do primarily with just making sure the records match in terms of names. In some cases, change applications have been submitted and maybe it's not the same name as it's on the permit, those kinds of things. And as you can imagine, there are quite a few that have submitted applications that have encumbrances on them, so those needed to be addressed as well. What I'd like to see and recommend going forward here is that since we have an obligation under the agreement to submit a list of willing sellers by February 1st, what I would recommend we do is that I submit the list that I currently have plus any new applications that I receive between now and the 22nd, assuming the applications are, good enough to submit, to the state engineer with the to the Department of Conservation Natural Resources, and the program manager there, Brandon Bishop, and I've already had a conversation with him about this. It would be a preliminary list, not necessarily prioritized, but just a preliminary list at this point, because really, the February 1st deadline is more for the department to understand where we are in the process. They need to know, because these are, I think they're ARPA money, but they're COVID-era type funds, which have a shelf life to them. And since this is a new program, the department is very concerned that the funds be spent so that they're not left or taken by someone else for another purpose. So they wanted to know early on how it's looking in terms of whether those funds can be obligated by September 30th of this year. So they're willing to accept that preliminary list, and then for the Humboldt River Basin Water Authority, we scheduled a hour, maybe a 90-minute special meeting, virtual meeting on February 9th at 9 a.m. for the Humboldt River Basin Water Authority to review their list of applicants and, if necessary, prioritize and then approve the list to go forward as an official list. I would recommend that this board do the same. It would be best if you could, we could all agree here at this meeting that February 9th at 11 a.m. for a virtual special meeting would be the place, the date and time to do that. But if that doesn't work, then we can obviously adjust that. But it needs to be done in early-ish February.
That's Friday? That's a Friday.
And what you would have, at least a week prior to that board meeting, is a packet of information on every application that was submitted for this program. And then, at that point, if there are more applications than there is funding available, then it would require some determination of what the priorities are, and then develop your priority list based upon that. We'll notify all applicants of the board meeting so that they have an opportunity and/or their representatives to answer any questions. There are likely to be questions because this is really complicated stuff, retiring water rights, as I learned, and I guess I should have known that all along. So it'll be an open, public meeting. The applicants will have a chance to be there and answer any questions and so forth. But you'll have a sense from us in that due diligence report if there are any outstanding conditions or things. And quite frankly, we expect that the approvals will be, in many cases, conditional approvals pending resolution of any of those outstanding conditions, as long as they're ones that can be addressed, fairly quickly.
Jeff, how does it look right now, the number of requests you have, or the dollar value of the requests you have compared to the $7 million in funding that we received?
Well, let me just explain this the right way, I guess. We're almost fully subscribed, if not fully subscribed. But there may be an opportunity for additional funding, so I don't want to say that there isn't funding available at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, based on what we have, and we're still evaluating some applications to make sure that the duties that have been reported are, accurate and those kinds of things, but we're pretty
So
close.
Humboldt River Basin Water Authority received $8 million in funding. Is it possible that some of the ones, a portion of the ones that we were not able to fund can go over to that program? And I'm kind of looking at Jake.
Well, again, I mean, they can move
Yeah.
back and forth.
Yeah,
It
right.
could go both ways. And so
Okay.
we're doing the exact same thing with the Humboldt River Basin Water Authorities, the due diligence on those applications as
Yeah.
well.
How many days left before the deadline?
Monday at 5 p.m.
Oh.
is the deadline.
Okay,
And as I mentioned, in addition to that, there's no guarantee or whatever, but the program initially started out as a $25 million program.
Yeah.
And kind of chide the state about why they need $3 million to administer, since we're
a
doing.
program that we're
Yeah,
administering.
administering. And so, could that money be freed up if we have more,
You're- Your
But,
tax dollars at work.
well, anyway, we'll see. So, but there's no guarantee that we would be able to get any more of that money, or, you know, whatever. But, so, just a couple of additional comments about this. One of the key components of this program is to be developing deed restrictions. And we're still working on those, but one of the requirements in the agreement, and we've talked about this, is to make sure in the deed restriction, there is an enforceable provision for the maintenance of those now non-irrigated lands. I know the details, you know, the devil's in the details on something like that, but we at least need to make sure that there's language in the deed restriction that makes it clear. One, it's the landowner's responsibility. Two, it's not CNRWA's obligation, or, you know, we're not going to do it, we're not liable to do it. It's the landowner's obligation. And three, it's going to be enforceable. How we enforce it, that's the discussion for another day, but if it's in the deed restriction, then at least, you know, there are ways that we can try to make sure that that happens. And we're still working on the actual mitigation plan. Right now, it's just general, but I think the conventional wisdom is, you know, you plant some cover crop like crested wheat, and that should be good enough, but there may be other ways to do that. And then the other part of this, which is something I do need to mention, is that in our conversations with the Division of Water Resources, and as part of the program, we agreed, one, that, you know, anybody who sells a water right, this does not affect their domestic well or ability to get a domestic well. And two, if they want to maintain 2 acre-feet per quarter section of land, as part of that permit that's being retired, it will be incumbent upon the applicant to request a change application for that 2 acre-feet from the Division of Water Resources, and that will need to be done before the sale is executed. So, I mean, assuming that change application process gets started as soon as, you know, mid-February, you know, I think there's a pretty good chance that we can get that taken care of in time. But it will be something that the applicant is going to have to do if they want to keep that 2 acre-feet. And we've had a lot of discussions with the Division of Water Resources about making sure our process is aligned with what they're doing and all of that. The other thing that we pretty much have agreed on is that the default date for the actual retirement would be September 30th, and unless someone wants to just retire it, get their check sooner. But the reason that September 30th is the date is because that's the last day that we have to obligate the funds. And two, because we're getting into a season now where, you know, farmers are thinking about what they might do this summer, or, you know, this season, whether or not to continue to irrigate. We don't want to be an impediment or create any issues there. So, you know, if you want to continue to irrigate through September and you're an applicant and, you know, we're still working through some issues, you can do that and still retire your water right by September 30th by default. But if you want to do it earlier, we can accommodate that as well. I think that that's pretty much it. I guess I'll just conclude my remarks by stating this. If, based on what we have today and what I anticipate we'll get if anything, in the next few days, I would say, at least for, and this is all very preliminary, but I'm very pleased with what has happened and how this program, excuse me, is kind of unfolded. As I mentioned, we initially went into this with 4 priority basins and, you know, 1 clear priority basin, Diamond Valley, because of its critical management area designation. And, you know, we wanted to try to provide a way for farmers who were interested in retiring their water rights, and just, you know, help try to address some groundwater problems in those 4 basins to do so. given the situation with the basin and the status of the basin and potential for any future issues there, the folks that we're seeing, are folks that I think are the kinds of permit holders that we thought we would see interest from. And so from that standpoint, I think so far I'm pretty encouraged by what's going on, but we have a lot of work to do, so please, if we're back here in September and there's some issues that have come up, which there invariably will be, this is just based on the applications that we've received so far.
Jeff, I'm assuming you've talked to quite a few of these people, if not all of the applicants?
I think I've talked to pretty much every one of them.
So without disclosing any identities, can you just tell us why some of the folks are willing to relinquish their rights? I'm assuming it's not all related to the money.
Well, everybody obviously has to make their own decision, has different motivations, but I think just in general, and I don't want to speak specifically to CNRWA or HRBWA, but just my sense of what's going on out there is, last season notwithstanding, the situation seems to be getting more dire, and we're going to have I'll do a brief presentation later on the agenda about the new basin assessment maps, but there are a number of groundwater basins, including in the central region, that are in pretty rough shape. And it's not just Diamond Valley. And I think people are beginning to see, one of the things about this program that we've really tried to emphasize is that while I'm not going to sit here and say that there isn't the possibility of a permanent program and funding that will be available in the future, there isn't one today. And we tried to get one going in the 2021 legislative session. But for the Humboldt River Basin Water Authority and the Central Nevada Regional Water Authority to have $15 million to retire water rights is a pretty unique opportunity. And so I think people in general looked at the condition of their basins, and, quite frankly, when we were doing the analysis of the value of water, it was based on the price of alfalfa hay, which is what the vast majority of these farmers are irrigating for, and that wasn't all that great this year. And so who knows what the future holds, but I just think for a lot of people it was a obviously personal decision, and maybe they didn't have maybe they're getting on in years, or they didn't have someone who wanted to take over the operations, all of those factors.
Yeah. Are there any questions for Jeff about this agenda item? Will everyone's schedule accommodate a special teleconference on Friday, February 9th at 11 a.m.? No.
Tony?
Yeah, just,
Excuse me.
can you move the mic over there?
It's on.
Oh,
So
you've got one. Okay.
one thing that makes me nervous about it is husbandry. I want to make sure that the contract has strong husbandry in it, weed control, rodent control. And I'm thinking that maybe they need to establish a bond so that 10, 15 years down the road, we still have some way of cleaning up the field if the grower won't do it. Because my family's, we're not going to do this, but we're going to be there. And we've worked hard in the last 30 years to clean the valley up from rodents, and I just don't want that to be able to, I want that ability to still be there, so.
Thank you for that point, and I know that is an important issue and something that we've talked about from day one on this program. And I think everybody who's been involved in this and everybody that's applied understands that and feels it's a priority as well. I will say this. We talked about the idea of holding bonds, but I don't know how we do that, because this money that we're purchasing, we're using, well, the state is actually doing the purchase, has to be spent by September 30th or it's lost. So we can't hold back a portion of the funding, and I don't know if it's appropriate or even legal for us to go in there and require a bond. But what I will tell you is this, I'm looking for the exact language. So it will be in the deed restriction, there's no doubt about that. Let me see if I can find that exact language.
Jeff, I wonder if there's a way for county boards of commissioners to
Well,
get,
So let me see if I can find the language, because I know
Yeah.
it's in here. I mean, so it's not a question of whether they're going to be required to do it. The question is going to be who's going to enforce it? How's it going to be enforced,
Right.
quite frankly?
Yeah.
But let me,
who are the cops going to be?
you're going to, we don't want this to be, quite frankly, neighbors turning in neighbors. I mean, that's just, hold on, okay. Okay. Recipient shall consider the mitigation of noxious weeds and environmental impacts resulting from the retirement of groundwater rights, should develop plans to address these, which we're doing. Master title agreement, according to file deed restriction, these issues take your feet, authorized, department. Oh, okay. So, deed restrictions may authorize retention, drilling new well, replacing existing wells. Says provision establishing the penalty for failure to comply with the deed restriction shall at minimum include a specified civil penalty adjusted to inflation from time to time. The restriction, I've got to look at this again, but I think there are some penalties that could be included in the deed restriction. So we're working with our attorney on this, but we obviously want to make this enforceable. And then at that point, it's, well, okay, who's actually going to enforce it? Well, as the chair has indicated, maybe it's a county code, or maybe it's just under regular nuisance type of situation.
That's exactly what I'm thinking, is maybe through an existing county code or drafting a new ordinance, some kind of a planning ordinance.
Chair,
Yes,
Commissioner Strickland here. I'm going to put on my other hat. I'm a real estate broker. And I want to remind this board that the water rights are a sole and separate deed from the deed to the land. And so I would be concerned that we have the authority, you can always put a deed restriction if the seller will allow it. But those are two sole and separate items, if you will. And so I'm not sure why we would encumber the land that the water was basically stripped from. I think we need a different way, and I'm liking the ordinance way, because actually counties and townships do have policing abilities through code compliance officers,
Yeah.
if they have them. And I realize the more rural we are, the less of that we have. But yeah, I mean, we've experienced in this little valley in Pahrump where we've had a major operator, farmer, let things go to turn into tumbleweeds. And they ended up all against all the houses, and, nothing was fun because people couldn't even get in their front gates. So I don't think that this is a viable way, I'm sorry, with deed restriction. You are selling a deed for the water by deed, and you have the land that stands alone by itself. Personal opinion. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you for that. Jake?
Thanks, Madam Chair. So if I understand, the state is requiring us to add a deed restriction through our contract with them. And then the other through is the land, often from what I understand as well, we are not acquiring the water through deed. It is an agreement where through payment, the water right holder will then just retire the water there's no
Right.
deed work. I guess it would be removed, that deed will no longer be valid, but they're retiring that water right. So they'll go to the state
Yeah.
and say, I've received this money. I'm retiring this water right. So there's actually no titling
And-
issues.
Yeah.
But
So,
if I can finish.
of course, I'm sorry.
But the contract with the state requires the deed restriction. We have no
Yes,
ability to
it's-
say we can't do it.
Yeah, it's in the contract.
Okay, so when the state is driving that, are they giving you direction? Are you putting a deed restriction on the land?
So,
Is this-
Commissioner, this is Jeff Fontaine. So on page, if you go back to the actual agreement is in your board packets if you happen to have it handy, but if not, let me just read the provision. So on page 5, it's, of the actual agreement, so it's section 10, water rights retirement provisions. Section 10, paragraph F on page 5, it says the recipient, which is CNRWA, in coordination with the department, file a deed restriction in the name of the state of Nevada on all parcels where groundwater rights have been retired using Nevada Water Conservation Initiative funds. These deed restrictions shall include the following. So we're required to file a deed restriction, and it's, now that I'm reading this, it's not clear to me about, I don't know that they're necessarily driving the requirement for the deed restriction to include mitigation, but I've got to go back through and look at that. But it is something that, personally, I think if we're going to have a deed restriction, that's where it should be. It's incumbent upon the landowner to take care of the land.
Yeah.
But in any event, I guess to just conclude this, like Jake said, the deed restriction is being required by the state of Nevada.
Jake?
Thanks, Madam
Yeah,
Chair.
go ahead.
So this is Jake again. So, keep in mind, so like in Diamond Valley, enforcement, having an enforceable mechanism is important, but having an enforcement mechanism doesn't mean it's going to be enforced. So that's what I think, we got to keep in mind. So like in Diamond Valley, for any lands retired in Diamond Valley from water, there's a weed through NRS 555, so it's a state statute. No county code needed. But there's a weed district and there's a rodent district. There's abatement authority under that statute for those things where the district can go in and complete the work and then place a lien upon the property for the value of the work done. That's that's already in state law. And so in Diamond Valley, we have an enforceable mechanism, but whether it's enforced or not is another story. So we can talk about that off record. But that is the case. So others may keep that in mind in your counties, that county commissioners can work with landowners to develop weed abatement districts and rodent districts that then requires that enforceable
Certain
mechanism.
actions,
And-
yeah.
So that's something you may want to look at a county level in actually establishing formal districts for that.
Deborah, does that help?
Oh, it does.
Okay.
That explains everything. It makes it clear why we're going in this direction, state-driven. Jake is completely right about the NRS. Hadn't thought about that. It's always been there. So, thank you. I appreciate all the knowledge that you guys bring to this.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing up the topic. Thanks. Jeff, that it? Yeah, Jake, go ahead.
One more question, and Jeff, if you're not comfortable answering. Of the applications you've received, have you had any outside of Diamond Valley in the central region?
I'd rather not answer that at this point.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll find out on February 9th.
Well, you'll find out February 1st, because I'm going to submit that list
Oh, okay.
to the state, so by February 1st, actually, on the 22nd, is when the I'd rather wait for the application period to close before we disclose anything, so, 5:01 PM on February 22nd, I guess, release the list.
All right, any other questions for Jeff? Jeff, are we ready to move on?
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, 11?
11 a.m. on the 9th, Friday the 9th. And it'll be a
Hello?
telephone. It'll be a telephone
This is
meeting. Oh, hold on one second. It will be a telephone.
A Zoom meeting, which will include.
Yeah. It'll be a Zoom meeting, which will include an option for calling in on your phone. And I think it should take about an hour.
I do have one other thing I want to mention.
Yeah, Jeff, go ahead. You had one other thing. Oh, I'm sorry. There was someone on the phone who had a comment?
Yes, Hank Boger.
Yeah, Hank.
I apologize. I didn't get this information until very late, and maybe you folks have discussed this before, but I just have a what if. When you remove the water from any parcel of ground, obviously the value of that ground goes down by 95%. It becomes a piece of pasture, possibly if you put it into a pasture grass, but other than that. So just for a hypothetical, if I wanted to give back, sell back, whatever, 100 acre feet of water, but I wanted to, could I save back 10 acre feet of water to irrigate some livestock or build a house to maybe enhance the value of a parcel? Or is it all or none?
So Commissioner, the first thing is, we're purchasing permits or certificates in their entirety, so we're not purchasing a partial right. As far as what the future use of that land could be, you maintain your domestic well if you have one, or you have a right to drill a domestic well on an existing parcel, and you could maintain your home, or you could build a home on an existing parcel. If you wanted to subdivide that parcel, either through the parceling process or the land subdivision process, you would have to acquire another valid right or purchase it or whatever, but you would need to bring new rights to that parceling or new parcels and have them dedicated to either the county or to your municipal water purveyor, if there is one in your area. As far as trying to maintain some type of, like I said, cover crop, the Department of Conservation, Natural Resources, and State Engineer basically agreed with us that someone should be able to keep at least a couple of acre feet of water expressly for the purpose of mitigation, per quarter
Yeah.
section, thank you,
It's up to 2 acre feet
Feet per-
annually per
per quarter
quarter
section,
section, yeah.
for the express purpose of establishing and
Right.
maintaining a cover crop, but that's the part where the applicant has to file for the change application for that 2 acre feet. And
Right.
again, we've discussed this with the Division of Water Resources. And that would not necessarily prohibit them from, maybe in the future, filing another change application, for example, to convert that to, or change it to stock water. So we're willing to leave behind a small amount for that purpose.
And that's included in the deed restriction, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that'll all be addressed through the Division of Water Resources. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what we're trying to do.
Well, driving down the road, you see a nice, beautiful circle with a crop of hay on it, and right next to it is pretty deserty, and so turning
Yeah.
it basically back to desert by eliminating the circle does quite a bit to the value of the property, and at least being able to plant a grass crop or something that livestock can use, and you'd still need to irrigate the livestock. So that was my question, and you answered it very well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Hank.
I did, Madam Chair, just want to go over one more item, if I may,
Yeah,
on this.
please.
Since I mentioned this early in the agenda with regard to the invoices, I just want to give you a quick rundown of where we are with the budget on this program. As I mentioned, CNRWO received a grant award of $7 million, of which roughly, I want to say, I don't have the budget with me, but it's roughly a little less than $200,000 of the $7 million is for management and implementation of the program, and also some match by the Central Nevada Regional Water Authority. So, just a quick rundown. We have, as I mentioned, budgeted 50, 200, actually, it's $243,000 for the entire program. To date, we have expended $13,000. Excuse me, $53,415. Of the $53,415, I anticipate submitting reimbursement requests from the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources for $38,570. So the majority of the invoices you approved for this program will be submitted for reimbursement under the grant conditions. What we did commit to, or this board committed to, is a match total of about $35,000. That includes my time in kind and associated expenses, and then the entire amount of expenditures with Hansford Economic Consulting for the valuation work, and that was done back in early July, August. And we needed to get that done ahead of time so we could have a really good head start on the program. And Hansford Consulting, Economic Consulting's total billings, including what you approved today, pretty much closed out. I don't anticipate needing to utilize their services, at least for the remainder of the year. So total amount there is about $7,672. We had budgeted $10,000. And then Conrad Communications, $500 of their total invoice will be used towards match. And then I've figured so far I've accrued about $4,800 in kind. So I would say the total match at this point is about $13,000. And so I guess the point in all of this is that we're definitely under budget. Our total, we had devoted $15,000 for media, paid advertisements and such. We spent $6,872. Resource Concepts contract is $150,000. To date, their billings are $20,476, although I expect that their billings in the future will be substantially more than that as
So
they
we're
go
good.
through. We're good.
We're good.
We're definitely good.
Okay, great. We ready for 15?
Did we vote on the board meeting, or did we need to?
I don't know, I don't think we need to vote on that. We're just setting we're setting a date and a time, yeah.
Okay.
Item 15 is a report from CNRWA's Legislative Committee and possible action to establish our priorities and policy statements for the next legislative session. Our chair of the Legislative Committee, Norm Frey, can't be with us this morning. So Jeff, would you like to deliver that report?
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. So at your last meeting, we talked about some of the early discussions related to the 2025 legislative session were sort of taking place, and groups were getting together to talk about some of these issues. And the chair suggested that the legislative committee, your legislative committee, get together, and we did that on January 8th. We had more or less an introductory meeting to kind of talk about where things are and some updates. So for starters, even though this is an interim period between legislative sessions, this is probably the earliest, at least in my short experience, that groups have gotten together to start talking about water issues for 2025, which is, I think, a good thing. Typically, what we see is sometime in September, we start to see bill draft requests and bills, maybe early fall of the preceding early fall of the legislative, before the legislative session, or even during the session, and then we'll get a water bill that's, I don't know, pretty comprehensive, pretty complex, and we're all kind of scrambling trying to figure out what it says, what it does, whether we like it, whether we don't, trying to get our respective boards together and all of that, and it's just, by that time, it's too late, and we can't seem to get anything done that way. So it's good to see that the conversations are starting to take earlier. A number of us specifically have been meeting with primarily the stakeholders that we have worked with in past sessions, Farm Bureau, Mining Association, several of the environmental NGOs. The Division of Water Resources has been involved, and Jake and Chris Mahana and Doug Busselman. So we've been having some meetings, I think 2 so far, sort of as an initial group. And we've talked about a number of issues that we might want to be thinking about for the 2025 session. And right off the bat, it was pretty much decided by consensus that we didn't think it would be appropriate to tackle conjunctive management in a very comprehensive way for the 2025 session unless we see a ruling from the Supreme Court on the lower White River flow system situation, Order 1303, which, depending upon how the Supreme Court rules, could really significantly alter things. But we just don't know, although, we're hearing, and I don't know if this is credible or accurate, but we're hearing that there may be a ruling sometime soon. So I guess we just wait and see. In the meantime, there has been some discussion about trying to be very specific about addressing conflict with existing rights. A lot of this about conjunctive management has been really involves some complexities with regard to science and studies and determinations and things, but and that's really the core of the lower White River flow system issue. But it's really about conflict and for example, in the Humboldt Basin, that's being studied in detail and with capture models and things of that nature. But so there seemed to be some interest in working on some language to better define conflict and how that might be addressed in certain situations. I don't know if that's going to make it or not, but again, this is a small group. And so even if this group believes that there's some good language going forward, we're not sure that there's going to be a universal acceptance from others about that. So I guess we'll stay tuned on that. This whole water rights retirement, voluntary water rights retirement, since Senate Bill 176 from last session wasn't enacted but got lots of support and lots of attention. I think there's pretty clear consensus that we're going to continue to do that, and I would, depending upon the outcome of this program, again, which I'm hoping will be a good one, I think we'd want to be behind that one and one of the major supporters of that, and I would fully expect to be asked to provide some testimony to the interim committees on that program as well. And quite frankly, what we're doing now in this short-term program, there have been a lot of lessons learned and a lot of ways that we can, I think, make that a permanent program with lots of enhancements. So that's going on. Water planning, I don't know where everybody is, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in my report about county water plans, but I think there's still a need for counties to have some technical and financial assistance in putting together county water resource plans or updates. I think they're becoming more and more important, and quite frankly, probably to the point where those plans not only need to be linked with your development plans, but also having ordinances enacted around some of the elements of your plans, perhaps, to deal with lots of water issues in your individual counties. There's been discussion, and you recall that CNRWA had asked for 2 BDRs in the previous 2 sessions to allow boards of county commissioners to establish their own county groundwater boards for designated basins in their counties. And first time it wasn't enacted, for a number of different reasons. It was also, I think, the pandemic year, so no one was even allowed to meet in person. This last go-around, we had a bill that I thought was a lot better and we thought had addressed many, if not all, of the concerns that the state engineer had about maybe creating some delays in their processing or even empowering counties to do more than, he felt would be required or allowed. And so we had a rewrite of that bill. It got favorable hearings, and then it got amended in the Natural Resources Committee in the Assembly, and then it got in the Senate, and it got a favorable hearing. But the Senate wouldn't accept the Assembly's amendment, so it became a political pawn, quite frankly. We finally broke the logjam the last day of the legislative session, and were able to finally get a conference committee together to try to iron out the difference between the Assembly amendment, which was an innocuous and, quite frankly, a friendly amendment for us. And as it turned out, the holdup had nothing to do with anything except someone hijacked the bill to try to use it for another purpose. So it was rather unnerving, but I guess shouldn't be unexpected in the legislative process. But eventually got worked out, but it ran out of time, didn't get voted on by the full Senate or Assembly. So kind of the next iteration of this is there seems to be more interest now in trying to be proactive and not necessarily get into the weeds on some of the decisions that are being considered and made by the state engineer at the local level, but more on the planning side of things. Perhaps trying to tackle groundwater management plans before they're being required at the threat of curtailment, stuff like that. And I still think that there is an extremely important role for county governments to have in helping manage basins. The Division of Water Resources has made it pretty clear, at least to me, that they have their own staffing and resource constraints and lots of complex issues to work out statewide. So it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, for them to work on a basin by basin, status or way to, address some of these overpump basins. And so, we may end up in a situation where, left unaddressed, more and more of these overappropriated basins become overpumped, and more of these overpumped basins become CMAs, and just, we just need to get ahead of them. And I think at the local level is probably one of the best ways to start. So I'm kind of, this is all conceptual at this point, but I just want to let you know, I think it's really important for this group, since, CNRWA has really been really strong on local participation through the water planning and through groundwater management boards, that this is something I think we'd probably want to support and try to get accomplished in the next legislative session. And then we also talked about continuing to support the Division of Water Resources and their endeavors with regard to updating their basin reconnaissance reports, their websites, their data systems, just from top to bottom, quite frankly, just a lot of needs over there in their infrastructure and staffing. They got a nice boost thanks to support from this group and others to get new positions, which I think they're still having a hard time filling because of pay and everything else. But we don't want that to be a one-and-done deal, and then everybody think that all of a sudden the Division of Water Resources has everything they need and everything's fine in the management of our water resources, and especially rural Nevada. So we want to keep supporting them. And then lastly, I brought this up and I said I don't have any specific agenda, nor do I have any recommendations, obviously, but I do think with all of this discussion about what's going on in the energy sector, we've had discussions today about lithium, brine extraction. We need to be thinking about how we manage or make sure that we're managing our limited water resources and the need for energy development in a way that's appropriate and workable. So those are the things that we talked about at the legislative committee meeting. We also, I also gave a quick update on the committee structure, so there will be an interim joint committee of the Senate and Assembly Natural Resources Committee meeting this interim, starting January 29th in Las Vegas. They'll probably have, I would think, at least 3, maybe 4 meetings elsewhere in the state, which is what they typically do between January 29th and early September, when they'll have a work session. Sometime in the late spring, they'll do an announcement for recommendations for committee action. So that would be bill draft requests from the committee or letters or whatever it is. So we'll need to be thinking about that ahead of time. We've already met with the staff of the committee. They've reached out to us and me and others about doing presentations and what the issues will be. The chair of the committee this year is Julie Pizzina. She chaired the Senate Natural Resources Committee. She's really great to work with, very interested in water issues. Senator Goicoechea, this will be his last time on the committee. Senator Scheibel, who had chaired Senate Natural Resources Committee in her first year in the Senate, knowledgeable about water. She'll be on there also representing the Senate. On the Assembly, Natha Anderson will be vice chair. She's out of the Sparks area. Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod from Southern Nevada. She's been on Natural Resources in the Assembly. Selena LaRue Hatch, Assemblywoman from Reno, is also on the committee. And then Assemblyman Rich DeLong from Southern Washoe County, who has a really good background in water and was successful in getting, 2 or 3 different bills passed this last legislative session, is on there. And then Assemblyman Burker from the Elko area and the greater rural Nevada, represents greater rural Nevada. And then there's some alternates, including the Hanson, Senator Ira Hansen and Assemblywoman Alexis Hansen. So I think that's it. And then the last thing, on this agenda item at least, is in preparation for the session, and it's not too early, I don't think, to start talking about this, are there any thoughts or concerns or requests for things that we might want to start developing position statements around to put us in, solid footing in terms of what our thoughts are on particular ideas? And I will point to the CNRWA position statement on conjunctive management, because even though there wasn't a conjunctive management bill enacted last session, that position statement that you all adopted 2 years ago was heavily referenced and pointed to in terms of what some of the ideas could be in terms of a statewide conjunctive management statute and program. So I just want to let you know that those position statements, not only are they useful for me, but they seem to have really resonated with others in the water field. So that's my report. I don't know, Jake or anybody else on the committee
I think you covered it all.
want to add.
Yeah. All right, questions for Jeff? We'll move to item 16. This is a discussion and possible action, and we will have to take an action on one of these items regarding water rights applications filed with the Nevada State Engineer. This, I think, is tab number 9 in your backup.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So, since your last report back in September, I added pages in the October, November, December monthly reports that had any applications filed in the central region. I checked last night for any in January. There were no applications filed in the central region for January, at least so far. I flagged a couple, and then also I wanted to, as the chair indicated, give you an update on ones that have been filed. And the first one I just wanted to update everybody on is application. It's on the very first page, 1 of December. It's 93165. and it's for a new appropriation in Big Smoky Valley, 137B in Nye County for 600 acre-feet annually for irrigation. The basin is designated, and what's unclear to me is whether or not Big Smoky Valley is in fact over-appropriated, because when you look at the hydrographic summary, it shows that it's not, but when you look at the new basin maps that the state engineers developed, it looks like it is. So I don't know if anybody has any information about that application or any thoughts.
Midge Carver, are you on the line? Midge? She told us prior to the start of the meeting. Oh, okay. She had told us prior to the start of the meeting that she was there.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Jake.
So I looked at this application as well, and it's, alls it is it's a point of diversion only of a portion, and it adds to an existing total combined duty group that can't be used more than 1,000 acre foot annually. So this will not add, it's adding a new
Oh.
point of diversion under a TCD group.
Okay.
Okay, but it's adding irrigated land, right?
Yes, but it will not increase.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. All right. Okay, thank you for that, Jake. So what's up with the Bank of Ely?
This is a gravel pit operation. I don't know what the bank's role in it is,
Yeah.
but in any event, it's a gravel pit operation to wash the gravel and for dust mitigation. It's
Okay.
not an over-appropriated basin, so I flagged it, but I don't think it's necessarily something we should protest. Or, I don't know about White Pine County, but it's on the next page, 93176 and 93177 in Spring Valley.
I did my homework, Madam Chair, so if I can.
Yeah, please, I would appreciate it.
The one thing about so Spring Valley isn't over appropriated, so there's actually, the perennial yield's 84,000 acre feet, and there's about 23,000 on the books. But what was interesting about this, I thought, is there's two different applications, both for gravel pits, but application 93177 includes 40 acres of crop, is what it says. But the place of use, so it doesn't identify where the map didn't show where the 40 acres that would be irrigated. It's all under a gravel pit place of use. And there's a few of these in here where I've brought this up in the past, where you see applications for commercial use for irrigation.
Oh, yeah.
And, I guess all farming operations, you could say, are commercial use. So I don't understand, if somebody wants to do 40 acres of irrigation, shouldn't it be an irrigation water right,
Yeah, you'd think.
rather than a commercial? So what keeps, why doesn't every farmer just have a commercial right rather than so it may be splitting hairs, but I'm not understanding why many of these applications for irrigation now are coming in as commercial.
Are they,
hemp or marijuana grows?
No, this is 40 acres of, it says 40 acres of crop. With a gravel pit, so.
Madam Chair, this is Cody Hodges.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Cody if you had any input on this.
It's concerning. So basically, how the state or how the bank got it is the company went bankrupt.
Oh,
They bought it. The bank bought it through the bankruptcy court.
Okay.
I don't know if they were the original creditor or not. That gravel pit had some water rights years and years ago, but they had been taken for non-use.
okay.
That's a lot of water for
Yeah.
not an active gravel pit. Is there a pit there? Is there an operation that could be there? Yes. The question is, in my mind, is it speculative? And that's a whole lot of water for something
Yeah.
that's not being used. I'm not advocating to protest it, but I guess I was hoping to see what others had an opinion of, because the prior owners did not have anywhere close to that water at any time. So that's the only question.
Thanks, Cody.
Madam Chair, just want to, it is an application, so even if they're applying for a lot, they only can perfect what they put to use.
Right.
Right, so what they end up getting certificated
Yeah.
could be way less than this.
Yeah,
So I'm not as concerned about that, but I just still not sure, you know, how you can apply for irrigation without putting on your map what ground you're going to irrigate and calling it a commercial use. It seems to just kind of
yes.
skirt some
It
of
seemed
the.
like an awful lot of water. So a lot of questions and very few answers that are provided.
The other question I had was usually, at least in White Pine County, these gravel operations are all under mining and milling.
Yeah.
There's not a
right,
single one under,
Right,
there's not a single one
Yeah.
under commercial. And so that was the other red flag for me, is the amount of
Yeah.
water, and then applying for it as commercial instead of mining and milling.
yeah,
And I would be okay with it if they amended the application to say mining and milling versus commercial, I guess.
Chair,
yeah.
is there
Commissioner
a
Strickland.
possibility if there's any renewable energy going in that area?
There's not any renewable energy there's application there now, but there is a power line coming across, cross tie is coming through there. There is some things, there are some applications on BLM for Spring Valley, but
That would be the why.
Yeah, could be.
They changed that, they did that at a gravel pit here locally. They changed the use. They changed it to commercial, so then they could do the excavation for the renewable energy.
Yeah, kind of a interesting business for the First National Bank of Ely to be in, but, yeah. Okay, thank
There's
you,
a-
Commissioner.
Proposal right on Highway 50, just on the east side of the Spring Valley Road, up through North Spring Valley, for 1,100 acres. And there's a gravel pit there, but it's pretty much just rangeland. I don't think there's any other development there that I'm aware of. It's just south of the wind farm. It's right in there. But so the only other thing I could see of any heavy use of water is there's quite a bunch of mining claims across on Highway 50 there that they may be washing some gravel and trying to wash the mineral too, but you would think they would put in for a different type of an application.
Yeah,
Is there any way we can enable that and come back with whether we want to protest it or not if you had some more information?
So this is Jeff Fontaine, for the record, the policy of the CNRWA board is that the CNRWA board would not file a protest unless
our
the
own.
county
right.
filed a protest. If the county files a protest, then,
We'll support them.
I mean, it would still have to be voted on and
Yeah.
agreed to, but generally, that would be a prerequisite for the CNRWA board to protest an application. So I guess to answer your question, if it's looking like the county is going to protest this, then we can always take that up.
Well, this has just popped up on the radar just very
Yep.
recently, and
Yep, I understand.
so anyhow, Cody, I'll talk to Cody maybe get it on the agenda for the next meeting to discuss it at the county level. So,
All right,
All right,
that would
thank
be
you.
great. Thanks, let us know.
If we're through that one, the other one that I wanted to bring up, unless anybody had any other items to flag, but I think the others are pretty straightforward, except for 93039 and 93040 in Alkaline Springs Valley. Excuse me. 93039 and 93040 Green Energy Resources in Alkali Springs Valley in Esmeralda County for lithium extraction. This is it's not yet an overpump basin yet. But as you heard this morning from Niall and
Right.
as Dave Berger has indicated, there is a connection between Clayton Valley and this valley to what extent, we're not quite sure. They're looking at a 20-year time frame, so I don't know if they were approved for this application. I don't even know how if lithium qualifies as a temporary permit like others, but other mining activities. They're indicating that there would be basically 20% of the water that they're applying for that would be basically consumptive use, but they're looking at different technologies to reduce that. I had a couple of email exchanges back and forth with the folks in, excuse me one second, just 1 second, I need to get the receipt.
Oh. Jeff has to grab the receipt for lunch, so hang on just a second.
Sorry about that. So, okay, so that's something we wanted to look at, and the reason that this came up is because there's been sort of a history, even though the basin isn't over-appropriated, there's lots of pending applications, including ones by Esmeralda County that have not been acted on, but have been RFA for, 2 years or more. And then we've got all of these new lithium companies filing behind that, that we're not sure how this is going to end up. So I don't know if Chris or anybody from Esmeralda County wants to speak to this, but I did flag this one because I think there's some discussion that needs to be had. Can you push it back?
The county's gonna protest Green Energy's application. And I think the application will put it over appropriated if all 2,000 acres feet were approved.
Chris, do you have any sense of what, and I try to get a hold of your engineer, but I think he's in a hearing this week, but do you have a sense of what at least initially, what the protest would be
I
about?
don't know the details of the protest, but I do know, like, they talked about the 20% consumptive rate. That's what they're telling the water engineer, but their own technical documents say they have no idea. They've never done this before. They don't know what it's gonna be. So, and they're telling the state engineer 20%, that's probably the most rosiest figure possible.
Okay, well, in any event, I don't know what the board, and I did run this one by Dave Berger as well, to take a look at. The RFA date on this is February 3rd. I don't know how the board wants to proceed or not with filing a protest contingent upon, or condition on the county filing one, and we could certainly file it or not file it. It's, I guess that would
Which
be.
one is that, Jeff?
This is, these are applications 93039 and 93040.
Okay.
So that's that, and then the last thing I want to mention, well, there's actually two more things. In your packet also is the protest that I filed on behalf of CNRWA. A protest on application 92989. Even though I did not have board approval because of the timing of this, I needed to file it or not file it prior to this meeting, which I did, and that was based on primarily this application being identical to 4 previous applications, essentially, except this one
Yeah,
has a
and-
little bit of a twist on it that
And
makes.
for the record, it's the Granite Springs
Right.
Ditch and Pipeline.
Yeah, so in
and-
this case, it's pretty much the same thing. There's still not enough water.
Yeah.
Still haven't done any
And
analysis.
Churchill County filed a protest
Right.
also.
And Churchill County, by the way, I don't know if Chris is on the call or not, but Churchill County Chris did a really nice job on the protest. I mean, to the extent that, that's right,
Pershing County filed also.
So, anyway.
Yeah, okay.
So this is another pending potential
Yeah.
action item if the board wants me to just maintain it or withdraw it, or however you want me to do.
Well, I'd like to entertain a motion on that, just to confirm Jeff's
Yeah.
action.
So at least at this point, and then there might be one more to talk about as an update, but, so there would be two actions. I guess I would ask the board to consider. One is, do you want to ratify or support the protest on 92989 in Granite Springs? And then do you want to consider supporting Esmeralda County in a protest on the previous two applications that we discussed, which are,
Yeah, the 2,000 acre feet.
where are they? Yeah, the other
Shayna
applications
Hanna.
are, just for the record, I don't know if they need to be,
Can you turn your mic on when you make the motion, so we can get you on the, yeah, hang on.
okay. So it would really be maybe two motions, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too, two individual motions.
So the first one would pertain to groundwater applications 93039 and 93040, and whether, if your motion is to support Esmeralda County by filing
Did they
protest.
did Esmeralda file a protest?
They will.
And also, as Niall mentioned, the Jimfield mine well has been dropping every year. They haven't started pumping for the Jimfield mine yet. There's still exploration, but they have the water rights. So once they start pumping, the wells could even drop further.
So that would be the first motion, I guess.
And that is the supporting Esmeralda?
Yes.
Did they file?
I don't know if they filed yet or not.
So let's make it, what do you want to do, make it conditional?
Contingent,
On
yeah.
their Esmeralda County filing the protest.
Yes, okay. Motion by Commissioner Hudson, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by James Evans. Questions concerning the motion? Any additional comments? Is there any opposition to that motion? With no opposition, that motion carries. Thank you.
And then the second item.
Hold on, Jake.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Jake has a,
The second item would be whether you wanted to support or approve, I guess retroactively,
Yeah.
the protest filed against application 92989 in Granite Springs.
yeah, Jake?
Madam Chair, make a motion to ratify the protest filed on the Granite Springs applications.
Motion by Jake Tibbetts. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Mancebo. Questions concerning the motion? Any additional comments? Is there any opposition to that motion? Without opposition, that motion carries. Thank you, Jeff.
Madam
Yeah,
Chair, just
Jake.
With Commissioner Vogler and Cody, I was curious on the White Pine applications, 93112 and 93113 for irrigation in Steptoe Valley, changing from industrial.
So that's county water. That's part of the 25,000 acre feet. That was agreed upon by the county commission. Let's see, that was 2 years ago now. And that's what that is. There's another one in Lund that I'd like to talk about before we move off of this, but,
I mean, we'll be done.
Okay. So, when that water was approved for the power plant that never was built, Pete Moros was the state engineer at the time and actually had to designate power generation as a preferred use because future irrigation would not be approved. So I was just curious, where that water's kind of sat stale for a long time and now being actually changed to irrigation, when if it were applied for in irrigation in the first place, it would have never been approved.
Correct. And I, I have some personal objection to the 25,000 acre feet. But I don't know if Commissioner Vogler has something to state about it, but yeah, that was approved 2 years ago, and it's taken this long to go through the state. There's already one other application that the state engineer approved for the same duty. That was done at the same time as the state engineer approved the pump storage water.
So for irrigation?
Yes.
Because I'll just, if I can, Madam Chair, here's actually the ruling from August 25th, 1983, when that 25,000 acre foot was approved. It says the approval of applications is contingent on the siting of the White Pine Power Project in the Steptoe Valley Groundwater Basin. Should the final siting of the project be in another area other than the Steptoe Basin, the permits are subject to cancellation and waters will revert to the source. So it's just, you know, seeing, if it had been applied for irrigation, they would have been denied. So the
Yeah.
engineer had to designate industrial power use as a preferred use to even grant them. And now to be changing to irrigation, it just seems against what the intent would be. That basin is greatly over appropriated. 70,000 acre foot perennial yield, and there's 120,000 acre foot of water rights on the books, which includes this 25,000 acre feet for industrial use. To me, it just doesn't seem like the right thing to do.
I don't want to make it longer than we need to, but that was my same personal opposition to the pump storage water. In those two executive orders, it gave the area between Ely and McGill, safeguarded the water in between Ely and McGill for culinary use and quasi-municipal use. And the pump storage water was taken from outside that area and brought into that area. Prior to that, if I wanted to take my irrigation water, I can bring irrigation water into here. I could take it out, but couldn't bring it in. The state engineer ruled and allowed that point of diversion change into that area. And the response I got is basically that the executive order doesn't kill anything from happening. So I don't know if I'm making sense of that or not.
Okay, thanks, Cody.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, just a couple of other items related to this particular agenda item. First one is, I received some information about concerns in a basin in a couple of applications in White Pine County, which are not necessarily in the central region, but it looks like in the White River Flow System 93123 and 93124 from Bar None Cattle Company that were filed, let's see, what page are they on? 93124. What? They're actually not in this because since they weren't in the central region, I don't know that I flagged those, but I'm just wondering if anybody has any, at least from White Pine County or anyplace else, I guess, for that matter, anybody have any information about that or anything we want to talk about related to those two applications in Basin 207?
Madam Chair, this is Cody Odgers again.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Basically, what it is it's a desert land entry. It was a permit given on a desert land entry. The desert land entry has been withdrawn, and the individual's trying to sell the water. It says right on the water right that it was tied to the desert land entry. And now the desert land entries been withdrawn. The water right should have been withdrawn, and it wasn't done.
Yeah.
And so he's trying to sell that water now. So everybody in the London, Preston area has protested it, and they brought it to the natural resources at White Pine County. And then we've recommended it to the county commission to move further with it. But there hasn't been an action by the county commission at this time. That was just on Tuesday from the natural resource. But anyways, hopefully
Okay.
that explains.
Yeah, thank you. Jake?
So Madam Chair, when I learned about these, I looked them both up as well, and I actually have the permit in front of me here, and it's the exact same permit language for both of these, so as Cody mentioned, and I'll just read it. So it says, "This permit is issued under the condition that the desert land entry, which defines the place of use, becomes patented. If for any reason the DLE is canceled or closed, this permit shall also be canceled." So as Cody mentioned, that the DLE didn't go forward, it was
Yeah.
never patented, so now they're trying to transfer the water off.
Yeah, they
When
can't do
the
that.
permit disallowed that in the first
Yeah.
place. so.
Okay, helpful, thank you.
Okay, Madam Chair, and then just two quick other things. We received, does this thing keep going off? We received a response from, oh, sorry. There we go. This is a protest that CNRWA filed to application 92740 in Clayton Ridge, excuse me, in Ralston Valley, town of Tonopah, Nye County, and Esmeralda County filed a protest. We filed a protest, so we did receive the answer to the protest from the representative for the applicant, Authium, and basically it revolves around whether or not they believe, or we believe, or anybody believes that the basin is over-appropriated, not over-appropriated, primarily because mining rights are not really considered a permanent, since they're not a permanent right, whether or not that really means that the basin's over-appropriated, but I guess we'll find out on that. And then lastly, there's really an important hearing taking place this week, and I think scheduled also for next week, by the Division of Water Resources hearing officer on another Clayton Valley issue regarding application for water rights by Esmeralda Minerals, and for a number of permits in Clayton Valley for lithium. It's been was protested by Albemarle and Esmeralda County, and the hearing's taking place, and this is a really complicated issue, but it is in Clayton Valley, and you know, there may be some implications as a result of that case. And I think that's it on this item.
All right. Any final comments on this item? Questions for Jeff? Anybody on the phone? Anybody on the phone? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to item 17. This is a discussion and possible action regarding water right application, a water right application filed by Escalante Valley Partners for water in Iron County and Washington County, Utah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I learned about this as a result of White Pine County's concern with this application in Utah. It's in the Escalante Desert. There are some, I believe, 117 points of diversion planned for deep carbonate aquifer, inferred, I guess. I mean, they're talking about drilling between 1,000 and 2,000 feet or deeper in a basin that's over-appropriated and is already under a groundwater management plan. And so I guess the intent here is that this is new water, not considered part of the perennial yield, so it's available, which, you know, I'm not sure that we would agree with. But why we've filed for this is because, based on the USGS reconnaissance report that was done back in 1982, and follow-up reports. It appears that there is subsurface flow, especially in the deep carbon aquifer between that basin, those basins, and across the state line into southern White Pine County and Lincoln County. And the groundwater flow direction is such that additional pumping in the basin in Utah could, in fact, affect those two basins, or those basins in southern White Pine County and Lincoln County. White Pine County did file an application, or protest to this application. I also had Dave Berger look at this one, and with his experience with USGS reports, basically agree that there's definitely a potential for drawdown to occur, and unacceptable impacts and detriments to those basins in Nevada. My protest letter was filed on January 17th because that was the RFA date for Utah. Their process is you file a letter, or you provide information online, and, you know, similar to what we do here in Nevada, but a little bit more streamlined, I guess, perhaps. So I did file a protest letter. It's on the website. I did not get a chance to email it out to everybody. But similar situation, I felt like in order to meet the RFA date, I needed to either file or not file. So I did file this letter. And I guess at this point, the question would be whether you want to ratify this protest letter or not. And if anybody has any specific questions about the project itself or the reason why White Pine County and CNRWA would want to protest this, I'd be happy to answer those. But in addition to what I submitted on a sort of a technical side based on Dave Berger's analysis, the White Pine County application, indicates that they believe the application is speculative, it's not financially feasible, it does not comply with the Barrel Enterprise Groundwater Management Plan, it conflicts with existing decrees, and on and on. So I simply included in my protest letter that we would incorporate the points in White Pine County's protest letter in addition to what we submitted on a sort of a hydrologic argument.
Thank you, Jeff. Questions for Jeff? Is there a motion on this item? And it would,
I'd like motion.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said I would like to make the motion, Mr. Cody.
And what is your motion?
To ratify his
The protest? Yeah.
Yep.
All right. There's been a motion to ratify by Commissioner Odgers. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'll second.
Motion in the room by Commissioner Hudson. Questions concerning the motion? Any other discussion on this item? Is there any opposition to this motion? With no opposition, that motion passes. Thank you for that, Jeff. All right, let's see, it's 1:15 and there's a lot of lunch over there. So why don't we take, can everybody grab something to eat in 10 minutes and just come back here? And we'll finish up our business. We only have a couple of items left. None of them are action items. So we're going to take a 10-minute recess, and we'll be back in session at 12:25. Yeah, whoops. We're going to start in about 1 minute.
You do the maps that are on?
Okay, we're going to reconvene this meeting of the Central Nevada Regional Water Authority and move to item number 18. This is the Executive Director report to the Authority Board.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. There's several items I wanted to just cover, a couple of them pretty quickly, and one I wanted to spend a few minutes on, and that's the basin maps, one of which you see on the screen right now. But first thing I wanted to mention, I think we have talked about this a lot, and that is the commission to study the adjudication of water law cases, which was first requested by then Chief Justice of the Nevada Supreme Court James Hardesty back in 2021. I was appointed to that commission along with, I think there were probably about 11 or 12 members total representing the broader water community. And then on December, so we met, I don't know, maybe half a dozen times over the course of about 18 months. We were getting close to making some recommendations, and then time just kind of ran out, and I know Chief Justice Hardesty, of course, did announce his retirement. He ended up submitting a report on behalf of the commission and recommendations that we pretty much came to consensus on for the most part. Supreme Court had a hearing last March, and then in July they issued this order. And the order basically creates or recommends certain educational requirements for water law judges, which would now be required to hear water law cases. And so essentially, and this is in your packet, so you need to refer to it, but basically now, any water law case that arises under chapters 532, 533, and 534, which deal with the state engineer, adjudication of water rights and groundwater and wells, needs to be, or other chapters. Also, for example, 535 of NRS, which deals with dams and other obstructions, and 536, which deals with ditches and flumes, et cetera. Those cases now have to be heard by a certified water judge who would be designated by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court at the request of the district court judge to be certified as such, and Chief Justice would consider their knowledge, education, experience, and then the commitment for that district court judge to continue in specialized education in the area of water law. And in the event that there is not a certified water judge in your particular district court, then the Chief Justice would assign a certified water judge to hear that case in your district court. I would say that for the most part, this is everything that I expected and was more or less agreed to, at least on behalf of CNRWA and HRBWA, and we had discussed over the course of this process. The only thing that I thought we were going to do, and we just didn't, or wasn't as part of the recommendations, were the specific courses that we believed district court judges should be required to take. We had developed an initial list of, 3 or 4 pages of courses, and there was a subcommittee assigned to kind of narrow that down to be more specific. That didn't occur, so now that coursework will now be decided by the administrative office of the court. I'm told that There was a 2-day water law training class held at the Supreme Court this past October, and that 11 judges attended that training. And there were courses on hydrology, beneficial use, appropriations, administrative process, and so forth. So each one of those 11 judges was certified. And then that
Jeff,
training,
any idea where they were from?
the only one I know for sure is Judge Schlegelmilch, for sure, but I don't know the others. They're supposed to be updating the Supreme Court website to provide all this information. Like I said, the order was issued in July. Members of the commission weren't even notified of that, so we didn't even know that this happened until a few months ago, a couple months ago. So, and it's now in effect. So from the date the order was signed, there was a 6-month startup period. So as of, I guess, January 7th, this is now, the order is in effect. It's a 3-year pilot program. A couple of the positive things are that all these cases now need to be will be posted. And there'll be, information on the court's website about the disposition of these cases, which is good because I'm not sure everybody knows exactly how these cases ended up or where they are. So that's a good thing. And then the training courses were recorded so that there will be an opportunity for other district court judges who didn't attend the training to request certification. So that's the update on that. Let's see here. I wanted to remind folks, if you haven't already and you're still interested, the registration is still open for the Nevada Water Resources Association annual conference. It's in Las Vegas this year, and this board had approved paying the registration fee for one board member from each member county to attend. And there's still time to do that. If you're interested, let me know. It looks like a really good agenda for the conference, including panels on conjunctive management, water rights retirement, things of that nature that are directly related to the work that we do. So let me know if you're interested. Let's see. The state water planning effort is still continuing. What we learned at our stakeholder advisory group meeting a couple days ago is that it's now behind schedule. We had thought that it would be ready for the 2023 legislative session, but it's not going to be. It's probably going to go out for public comment sometime in the spring of 2025 and be published in the winter of 2025. The division has been doing tours of sort of regions. I know that they did a kind of an eastern central swing and visited with Eureka County. They visited with the Ruth McGill folks at the Ruth McGill Water and Wastewater, a couple of the tribes, Duckwater Shoshone tribe, and Yamba Shoshone tribe, and then some agricultural producers in White Pine County to get some feedback. And based on what they heard, what we heard at our advisory group meeting the other day, the comments out of the central region and eastern region were dealing with things like, needing more and sort of accessible funding for projects, a need for more transparency and decision-making on water management, better access and availability of data, and relationship building. That's seemed to be a theme that the division heard in that tour, having to do with making sure that the relationship between water right holders and stakeholders and the Division of Water Resources is maintained, and there's good communication. So overall, in addition to the Eastern tour, the staff did some tours in Southern Nevada, and I'll be meeting with them next week on an I-80 tour. But the common theme across the state seems to be people are concerned about overappropriation, concern about cumulative impacts or effects of development, not just looking at specific projects to see if there's going to be a detrimental or positive impact, I guess, and then also looking for more guidance from the state on water management decisions. So that's an update on the water resource planning effort. Let's see. Rural Conference, DRI. Okay, and then the last thing I wanted to go over are these maps, these basin maps. Some time ago, I want to say in the spring, I and a few others met with the state engineer and his folks about making sure that we had good information about what the priorities are for the Division of Water Resources and updating their information, because if we were going to go out, and this was really kind of a run-up to the Water Rights Retirement Program, because we wanted to make sure that we were targeting the correct basins, and also making sure that people understood that these basins were basins of concern for management, and we needed to do some things with that. So as a result, the division published or put together some updated basin maps, and the previous maps that we relied on, had relied on, were done in 2020 for the 2021 legislature, and there was really no data or discussion behind the maps. There were just maps with a blue and a red, and the blue showing over appropriated and the red showing over pump basins, and that was it. You couldn't even really figure out exactly which basins were which and what the explanations were. So these maps are, I think, an improvement on the previous maps that we had, and there's a series of 5 maps, and they cover 5 different sort of indicators. I'm going to start with the first one. And this is a map of groundwater trends in various basins across the state. And, hold on a second here. And by the way, just to be clear, and this is on their explanation, these maps are for public communication, general awareness of long-term vulnerability to groundwater shortage, and do not necessarily indicate any current shortage or imply any immediate administrative action. Lots of caveats we'll go through in just a minute. But in any event, the first one is groundwater trends. The red areas represent the sharpest decline of groundwater in those basins, and the sort of orange, deeper orange, is major decline, and the sharpest declines are greater than 1.5 feet per year. The major declines are between 0.91 feet and 1.5 feet, and then moderate declines that are between 0.31 and 0.9 feet. And what you'll see on there are at least a couple of basins with the sharpest decline in the central region, including Big Smoky Valley, Fish Lake Valley, and of course Diamond Valley. The hatched areas represent that in those basins there's mine dewatering, so that could definitely contribute to the water decline. But in any event, you can see that there are a number of red basins in the central region. At least half of all the red basins in the state are in the central region. And then also a number of other declines represented by the deeper orange in the central basin as well, and moderate declines. So this is just one indicator, but it'll just give you a snapshot of sort of where things are in the state and also within the central region. And there's lots of limitations on the data set, but again, this is just for sort of an overview and just communications in general. The next map, please. This is a map of potential surface water capture by groundwater pumping, and this really doesn't seem to be an issue in the central region. And if you look a little further to the north, where you see the reds and the deep oranges, that's primarily in the Humboldt Basin, where there is surface water capture. But in the central region, absent, any major regional flow systems, or streams, perennial streams, there really isn't a big issue per se, with the possible exception of Ruby Valley, Basin 176, which is, I guess, a high capture area, and Steptoe Valley, and I'm not sure I know the reason behind those, and maybe somebody does, but there's lots of assumptions related to how this map was developed, which may or may not give us a better explanation, at least in Ruby Valley and Steptoe Valley, and it's really surface water within a mile of areas that are being pumped, and just sort of, general parameters. So I don't know if anybody has any comments about either of those two basins in the central region or not, but it doesn't seem to be a huge problem, at least in the central region. The next map, please. So this is basically basins that are over appropriated, and obviously in the central region there's a lot of red and a lot of that orange color. I would say, at least from counting this up, there are 6 basins in the central region that are highly over-appropriated. That meaning the commitments are more than 350% of available water. 4 that are somewhere between 250% and 350% over-appropriated. Another 3 that are over-appropriated between 150%, 250%. And another 17 that are just over-appropriated more than 100%, but less than 150%. So it's 30 basins in total in the central region out of a total of 77 basins statewide, as far as I can tell. Excuse me, out of 77 basins total in the region. So, nearly half of the basins in the central region are over-appropriate, at least according to this map. And again, lots of assumptions and conditions in putting this map together, just basically looking at the hydrographic summaries of the sum of all committed water, including permitted, certificated, decreed, reserved, relinquished, revocable, domestic well use commitment, and on, and then estimates coming from the Division of Water Resource Well Log Database. So again, just a high-level overview of over-appropriated basins in the state, and in our case for the central region. Next map, please. This is percentage, or the number of over-pump basins. And in the central region, there are 9 over-pump basins. And at least, I want to say 2 of those basins are not in a member county, so maybe 7. And the only one highly overpumped basin, I guess the deep red one, I believe, is Stone Cabin Flat, Basin 149, estimated overpumped at 280%. And then the orange, which is the sort of, they're overpumped, but not to the extent that the red one is, and those are Gabbs Valley, Diamond Valley, and Penoyer Valley, and then a bunch of other lighter ones, Railroad Valley, Indian Springs Valley, Soda Springs, and Lake Valley. And then Tonopah Flat. So looks like there's a total of 9 overpump basins, which is pretty consistent with the data that we had earlier that we used for the Water Rights Retirement Program. And then next one, please. This one is really interesting to me. This is domestic well usage versus perennial yield. Outside of Basin 101, which is in the Carson region, that we don't have a situation where domestic well usage exceeds the perennial yield, but if you look at that basin, that's a pretty concerning issue there, where you've got domestic well usage versus perennial yield with that level of pumping. And again, there's lots of caveats here, and the other thing that's interesting about this is that the estimate is based on an acre foot for domestic wells, an acre foot being pumped for domestic wells. So, again, there's nothing like that elsewhere in the state except for that particular basin. So, last slide, please. This is a summary of all 5 of the indicator maps. Each of those maps, those 5 maps, are equally weighted to come up with kind of an overall basin status assessment, if you will. And again, just a high-level overview, does not indicate any particular action being taken or considered by the state engineer, or, level of detail for necessarily management, but just, again, a very high overview. In the central region, there's 4 very high basins that are red in terms of the overall basin status. It looks like another 11 that are high, the darker orange. Of that 11, I think a couple of them are not in member counties, maybe 3, like in Mineral County or Clark County, but still, looks like a total of 12 that are sort of in that either high or very high category for basin status assessment, at least as evaluated by the Division of Water Resources. As far as how this will be used, again, don't know. It's just something that we thought would be important for the Division of Water Resources to develop and work from there. So that's my report, Madam Chair, and I'd be happy to answer any questions on any of these items.
Really interesting. Any questions or comments about these maps?
I have one. It's Leanna Carey, Progressive Rancher. Is it okay if I go, although I do not sit on the board?
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead, Leanna.
Is there any way, you guys, Jeff, I can have an article put together for the March issue on these maps, or the last map, with a pretty detailed explanation of how this was gathered, by whom, and what you guys think about it?
Well, I mean, I think it would be a good idea to do an article as to who would do that. I'm not sure it's my place necessarily, and quite frankly, what I can do is, after this meeting, Leanna, we can get together, because everything that I just explained and then some come with an explanation in terms of how these were developed by the Division of Water Resources. So it's pretty much all there.
Okay.
So I would feel, I guess, more comfortable sending you that first and make sure you have it so you can read it. And then, quite frankly, if you have questions in terms of the overall development and such, that would be, I think, appropriate for the Division of Water Resources to answer as far as how we would view it. I mean, I don't know how everybody else here views it. I think it's
information.
It's
useful.
information, yeah. Yeah.
Well, you do know I don't write, because I'm not an expert. Most everything that goes into my magazine is backed by the expert that writes it or gathers it or presents it. So that's why it's important that the articles that go into the magazine, especially about these issues, are documented, sent, and supported by experts, which you guys are. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. That's why I did the air quotes, experts. Item 19, board member, executive director comments. Are there any comments from the board? Jake?
Madam Chair, today is, if you didn't hear, Rod McKenzie from Lund. Passed Rod McKenzie, he was Carol McKenzie's husband. He served on the White Pine County Water Advisory Board for a long time. been involved in water issues. We had some interactions with him on this board in the past. He's attended some
Yes.
of our meetings. He passed away recently, and his funeral is today, so just wanted to note that for the
Yeah,
record, that
thank
he
you.
was in the water world, had
Yes.
provided a lot of information, so
Yeah.
thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments for the record? Yeah, Marty?
Just a comment of appreciation to Churchill County first for hosting, but for our very capable Madam Chair and Vice Chair in spirit.
Thank
We
you.
have a great executive director, and if it goes by fast, you're having fun.
Well, that was very nice. Thank you, Marty. It's absolutely been a pleasure to serve. Thank you. Any other comments? Anybody on the phone? Comments for the record?
I have one. It's Leanne. May I go?
Yes, please.
This is such a simple cowgirl explanation of the problem, and I pulled it up. 1864, Nevada population, 40,000, of course. Population, 1960, 290,000. Population, 2023, approximately slightly over 3,200,000.
Wow.
I rest my case.
Yeah, all right. Thank you. Other comments for the record? Jeff, let's set a date, time, place for the next meeting. After you swallow.
So, Madam Chair, we did agree to February 9th at 11 a.m. for our special meeting. I don't anticipate needing another meeting between that time or another special meeting, and the next will be the regularly scheduled meeting. So if you count 3 months from today, that puts us into roughly April, which would probably be a pretty good time frame to have another meeting. The only thing is, I don't have NACO's schedule yet because they haven't set one for their meetings, but, I mean, it'd be great if we could schedule one now, and at least we can make sure that this room is available.
Okay.
So,
Let's do that.
January to March, well, no, I say January to February, February to March, March to April. That would put us at the, maybe the 12th, the 19th, or even the 26th, I guess.
I'm just going to look at their website real quick.
I don't know if we know about SLUPAC or not.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Would be on a Friday in
Yeah,
April?
there's nothing on their
All the
webs.
Fridays are open in April, so the 5th, the 12th, the 19th, and the 20th are the Fridays.
And NACO doesn't have anything on their website yet for their 2024 schedule.
You want to just pick a date and?
Yeah, just let's go with the 19th.
Okay. April 19th for everybody? Is that,
Yeah.
you won't be, your board won't be meeting on the 19th?
10 a.m. Yeah, same bat time, same bat channel. Did everybody on the telephone get that? We're going to meet at 10 a.m. on Friday, April 19th in the Commission Chambers at the Churchill County Administration Building.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item 21 is our second general public comment period for this meeting. Again, this time is devoted to comments by the general public. We do not take action on those items until they have been placed on an agenda. Is there any public comment? Hearing none, general public comment is closed, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.